I will call to order the Parks and Recreation Commission meeting for May 27th. Ms. McGill, well, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance first. Stand, please. Ready? Pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Yeah. Ms. McGill, will you do roll call, please?
Chair Longstreet.
Here.
Vice Chair Larimore Hall.
Here.
Connor.
Here.
Burns.
Here.
Hockman is not here, and intern Torres Santos is not here.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Repp, are there any changes to the agenda today?
No, Chair Longstreet.
Written communications? None? Public?
Our Parks Manager, Santos Escobar, to give an introduction. We'll start there.
Well, thank you very much.
You on? Is that?
I believe I'm on.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chair Longstreet and Commissioners. I'd like to introduce to you today President Hetty Shercliffe, our President for... And also Mr. Robert Funet, our Rose Garden coordinator.
Charge of the volunteers and rounds them up and make sure they're there and signs some bids and all that, as well as he has initiated an apprenticeship at the Postel Garden. In addition, he's been on the board of the Rose Society for over 5 years and is always helping out, either to set up at the beginning of the meeting and cleaning up at the end, and he brings roses for the raffle so that we can stay financially afloat. It is wonderful, and it was a no-brainer to award this medal to Robert. Thank you, Robert. Thank you very much. You well deserve it. Thank you very much.
We have an award, not a medal, but a certificate of our appreciation, and it says to Robert Funet for his continued dedication to the AC Postal Memorial Rose Garden and overall commitment to coordinating Rose Garden volunteers at the city's accredited Rose Garden. And to me, you exemplify the kind of employees we have in Parks and Rec, and your dedication makes our garden so special. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Is that better? Thank you for the award, and thank you, Hetty, too. I believe it was kind of her idea on that one. Didn't really get a chance to thank everybody who was behind me getting to this point in my career. I made a change, a career about 10 years ago, and went through the horticulture program, and by the luck of the Irish, I ended up getting a part-time job when I was in school taking care of 300 roses. That led me to the Rose Society. I pruned them the first year, and I was hacked to shreds. I needed to learn a little bit more about rose care, so that's where I began, and wasn't long afterwards I met Ray and Jesse Monk, who you might remember, who took care of for 11 years up there of the volunteer coordinating. And they were, when they retired, they talked to the city and said that you need to get Robert on your staff so he can keep track of things, you know. And that's kind of how I got the job. I've been a Rose Society member for 10 years, and this is a service award, but I'm considered the Rose Volunteer Coordinator for the Rose Society, as well as my job title with the city parks, too. So I do kind of wear two hats one time there, and a lot of my work has been compensated by the city as well, you know, so it wasn't all volunteer work, but everybody comes up to me and says what a wonderful job I have and a wonderful job I'm doing, but I'm recognizing all the people that were along with me there, including I have started out with 60 volunteers. I now have 86 lined up, so I'm breathing a little bit easier, and everybody's got a spot to take care of. But I did want to definitely mention Ray and Jesse, who were my tutors, and I also want to thank all of the city parks employees that gave me the opportunity and kind of let me learn the hard way as far as what it takes to do the job. And I'm still on a learning curve there, but it's been an incredibly rewarding job to deal with so many people from the public. Nancy and Santos and Steve Takaya, and I've got to mention Mark Vogel as well, longtime city parks employee who was very helpful early on and had a lot of experience in the Rose Garden that he passed on to me. So, you know, the volunteers, the visitors as well. It's just been, I can't express how grateful I feel to have a job like this, to be up there and do it. I sweat it sometimes too, but I'll finish with the fact that I'm very proud of the Parks Commission for helping the city along with its IPM program, and that I think we've done some really amazing things up there. We've had 3 really good years of weather, and sometimes the roses don't look as good as they do, but we've been riding a crest of Mother Nature's good weather for us, and that's made things a little bit easier. But Santos and Steve have been really supportive and very integral in keeping the pesticide use way down to the point where we're only having to use 1 or 2 sprays a year with non-toxic materials, and I'm very proud to announce that to all the visitors of the parks. They really appreciate that. I know the public that's one of their main concerns. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
I was
Thanks.
just admiring your work this weekend. Thank you very much.
Before Robert moves on, I just have to say that, you know, every manager has these opportunities, but I have yet to attend an event at the Rose Garden where the volunteers don't come up, and more than one over the time that I am there, to tell me how much they appreciate Robert, his knowledge, his service, and what a terrific guy he is to work with, and how much they appreciate him. So thank you, Robert, on behalf of the community and the Parks and Recreation Department.
Thank you. Well, it's always a nice way to start off the evening, and our Rose Garden is a jewel. So that brings us to Commissioner Committee Assignment Reports. Does anyone have things to report?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Burns?
Yes. The Teen Council will be meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. A couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to forget which Monday that was, they had a Monday evening that they helped put on the Teen Award Program, where 29 teenagers from the South Coast got awards for doing good work, and that was very good. The Front Country Trails Multi-Jurisdictional Task Force, if I've got that correct, was going to meet the day after the Jesucita fire, and that meeting has been rescheduled for July 1st. I'm, as part of being on that commission, I'm hiking the Front Country Trails. I did San Isidro Trail Sunday. The Arts.
Because it's an open one.
Yeah, it is one of the open ones for the people in the public. There's a lot of, on television, there's a lot of trails that are closed right now indefinitely, but possibly in a month or so they'll be reopened, but I'm not sure.
I've asked Jill to give a report on that shortly.
But I'll shorten my speech. The Arts and Crafts Commission, at their last meeting, they made a comment, and they're very happy that we have taken it into our report, that they like to have the monitor for the skateboard park around on Sundays, because it helps the Arts and Crafts show, and we're hoping that happens. And then lastly, the Park Foundation, they're starting a membership drive. So there's a lot of activity going on. So those are my reports.
Anyone else? I'm pretty much, I think, on the same track as Commissioner Burns, and we both attended the teen banquet, which was a very good affair. It was very wonderful to see all those high-achieving teens and the awards given. And today we did attend the Park Foundation and meeting, and so that's about all I have. So that brings us to Commission and Staff Communications.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, this is our first meeting since the Jesucita fire, and I've asked Assistant Director Jill Zachary to give a brief report both on the damage to our parks and on the Front Country Trails, as she's been doing a lot of work towards that effort.
Welcome, Ms. Zachary.
Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission, as you know, the Jesucita fire was rather significant in its extent. As far as city parks are concerned, we had damage to Stevens Park, we had damage to Laurel Canyon, a little bit of damage to Schofield, and then Rattlesnake Trail. If you remember Rattlesnake Trail, the lower portion of it was impacted by the Tea Fire. The remaining section of the trail was impacted by this Jesucita fire. In fact, the two fire boundaries joined, essentially, just over the ridge from there. As far as damage to our parks are concerned, in some ways, it's not as significant as the damage that we had to Parma Park, which literally was impacted significantly. We do in Stevens Park, and the damages north of the Foothill Bridge. You probably saw on TV how the firefighters held the line there, and that was critical because if the fire continued down, it would have been straight into the San Roque neighborhood. There are burned trees. There is still ash. The trails themselves are not in terrible condition, but there is sort of loose material. We are inspecting those areas, and we'll have to do similar type brushing work that was done in Parma Park, so removing down trees and brush that have the potential to impede the creek. We're also in coordination with county flood control, as you can imagine. The majority of the fire was in the unincorporated areas, and they sustained a lot of damage. So a lot of those burn areas will eventually enter drainages and enter into the city, and that's kind of our critical concern at this point, is how to mitigate potential erosion. And now that it's May, we have a little bit more time than we did in November, which was literally 5 to 10 days before we were really worried we'd have a significant storm. So even though we have some additional time, we are starting to plan how to mitigate potential impacts there. Laurel Canyon, luckily we'd actually done vegetative fuels mowing before, so we actually think that really helped keep the fire where it was. If you go up there, you'll notice that the backstop is still there. The bench is still there. The Mutt station is still there. The area was burned, but park staff had already done a lot of work, as well as having done work at Schofield Park. In fact, we had a number of goats that had to be moved soon after the fire started in order to be protected. The Front Country Trails, there's been a lot of back and forth over what's open, what's closed. We did release a new press release today, which really tried to clarify for the public what's going on. Tunnel Trail is closed. Jesucita Trail is closed. Tunnel Connector, which connects Tunnel Trail with Rattlesnake Trail, is closed. And Rattlesnake Trail is closed. And essentially, Rattlesnake Trail is closed from Las Canoas all the way up to East Camino Cielo. Even though the lower part didn't burn, it's still impacted from the T fire, and we're actually hoping to do some work there this summer. But it leads you into the burn area, so we've just closed the entire trail for now. We are working with the Forest Service and our county counterparts on trail hazard assessment. There's down brush in some cases. There's a lot of loose rock. Since most of the vegetation is gone, everything that held it in place is heading downhill, and so there's a lot of concern about that ravel continuing to move. So we will be looking at ways to try to stabilize it. We are concerned about people going off trail. As you know, one of our key considerations is keeping people on the trails even when there is vegetation, because unauthorized trails can also lead to further erosion and also can take people to places where we may not know where they are. There's a reason why we want to have a known trail network. So we've closed them for now. We are working with our trail stakeholders to get the word out to everyone. All the trails are posted. We are hoping to have a series of work days because we don't anticipate that the trail vegetation will change dramatically in the next 3 to 5 months. But we do need to remove hazards and look at ways to stabilize the trails, because over time they will open. The other thing I wanted to mention is, particularly in the Tunnel Road area and Tunnel Trail, there's a lot of fire recovery work underway, and one of the reasons for keeping the trails closed as well is folks that are back in their homes or trying to deal with their destroyed homes need the time, and there may be trucks, heavy equipment back there, and it's really not a good place for people to be going to recreate right now until we have a better sense of how safe it is and how to make sure the hazards are minimized. And lastly, just to acknowledge for our county counterparts, if you're familiar with the San Marcos Foothill Preserve, which is a wonderful space over by Highway 154, it's sustained similar damage to our Parma Park. So from a natural resources standpoint, there's a real loss there, but we'll be working closely with our county counterparts and sort of sharing objectives for restoration and how to bring habitats back and that kind of thing. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I was just glad to hear that the trails are posted, because I've been getting that flurry of email, and it didn't say in the emails that the trails were individually posted, and that was kind of my question. It seems like whenever we get to anything changes, we get that little flurry of emails, and I don't really want any destructive comments or anything. I want everybody to just work together on this one. All the user groups.
Chair Longstreet, if I could just add, it is a challenge because these are well-loved trails. They're easily accessible. People are accustomed to being there on a regular basis. There's a natural curiosity when there's a natural disaster to go look and see what happened. And so we are really hoping by getting the word out, people take the time and stay away until we can give them a further update and suggest that they find other places to hike. There are other fun country trails that are open. Romero is open, San Ysidro is open, the main stem of Cold Spring is open, and then there are a myriad of county trails in the Montecito area. We did reopen the trails in Parma Park. So there are lots of places for people to go and hike and enjoy being outdoors.
So our request to the public is to stay off the trails that are posted until they're safe and we can establish a good resource recovery plan.
And stay on trails in general.
If they can find them, stay on them. No, yeah, that I think it's very, very true, and I hope people will heed that request. So, and we will get you to a Front Country Trails meeting yet. Okay, thank you for that. It was a very, it's been a really disastrous year. It's been pretty amazing, and I hope the recovery is. I think it will be. I think this is part of nature, but we're not used to having houses in the foothills as close to these fires. So, are there other commission and staff communications? Mr. Burns.
Chairman, yes, I have a question, or a statement, I guess. The AYSO has about 3,000 children that play AYSO soccer, and of those, probably 85% of them are under 10 years old, and it seems they're having difficulty finding practice fields. Their season is mid-August through mid-November, and I'm wondering if we possibly could have staff look at what we can do to help them if possible, or to see if what we're doing now is adequate. But if we could, kind of put that maybe on the agenda next month or so.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Burns, yes, we would be happy to come back to you with a report on our current policy and practices. Last year, we did get a lot of inquiries and calls expressing that concern by parents who were coaching the small children teams. And our current policy is that we don't allow it in our parks because several years ago it created tremendous overuse and damage to the turf. But I do think that, every once in a while policies need to be revisited. So we will come back to you with kind of an overview of, from our perspective, what's in place and why and what we've been asked or what our options, what we see as options. So we'll bring that back in the next meeting.
Thank you for bringing that forward. And I'd be interested in sort of the different age levels. Like what a 5-year-old soccer team needs is so much different. I mean, they really just need a flat, small piece of grass. They don't need a complete field. And they're usually just doing skill drills. So, what we could accommodate in different places and how that would work. So, thank you.
And commissioners, along the lines of future agenda items, I wanted to check and see when, as we mentioned during our budget discussion, the department feels the need to reduce the number of advisory committees that we have. We've talked about that with the staff reductions that we've taken. We feel that that's an appropriate discussion to have at this point. So I wanted to check with the Commission in terms of how you would like to proceed with that discussion, and if you would like to put that on your next agenda, which would be in June. So I wanted to get a sense of that issue and how you'd like to move forward.
Thoughts?
Just a comment. Some of the commissions don't meet on a monthly basis, and we may be disbanding them possibly before they meet. So I don't know how we're going to handle that, and maybe we won't disband them, but we've got to start sometime. So let's just start the process moving and see what happens.
I mean, I would appreciate as complete a proposal as possible with all of the relevant data about each of the advisory committees, how many people are on it, or how many seats there are, how many are actually full, and to be able to look at it holistically, because it may be that there's some that need to be disbanded. Of course, maybe we change the meeting schedule of others, et cetera. So the more that can be on a single sheet of paper, the better. And as for agendizing it for the next meeting, I think that would be great.
And I would like all that information. I noticed as we went through some of the budget, the fees and charges issues, we have a number of committees that have not had quorums for some up to 2 years. So I think that's good information for us to see. And then I really would like a bit of staff perspective on how we would involve the public, or how we would address that if we didn't have that. I'm thinking of the active adults. How are we going to plan programming if we don't have any input? Maybe that's not the venue to get input, but what do we want to do? So some proposals in that area.
The commission should anticipate that the department also has that concern, and our direction for some of these committees will just move away from being a Brown Act committee to more of a program committee, similar to how the Adapted Advisory Committee works. It has, representatives from people that we work with closely in the community from other agencies where we're talking about current issues and program needs, and it's a more healthy discussion. And so we're looking at that model, and maybe, in some of our program areas, just moving away from, we'll be looking at the frequency of meetings and whether they need to be a Brown Act. I think that there's still a need to have some voice back to the commission, a report to the commission. So we'll bring that back for initiating the discussion.
One idea. We're looking at June. The budget will not be finalized by our June meeting. Would it be better to do in July when we know where we're going with some of the proposals that are in the budget, and how we look at that kind of melding of programs?
That's what I was going to mention. I thought that would be a good idea. Also, I like what Nancy's saying about going with the adaptive model, the adapted programs model. When we made the shift and we went to that model, it seemed to be a more of a collaborative working committee. And I really felt like they really took off then. So, yeah, I like that too.
Okay, well, we will bring that back for your July agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we will not have a youth council report tonight.
Actually, Chair Longstreet, we were able to get some information from Diego that he would have been reporting. So Sarah Hanna will provide that report.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, I recently joined Youth Council, so no. You both
dream a little dream.
Several of you already touched on a couple of the topics that Diego was going to bring forward, but I just wanted to reiterate. The Youth Council interviews are tomorrow for several vacancies, and there's still time for teens to submit applications. So they can come at 3:30 tomorrow afternoon, submit their application. If they want to call and get more information, the teen program's phone number is 897-2650. I was happy to see several of you at the Teen Leadership Banquet. It was the 8th annual banquet. I thought it was what a wonderful night. How sweet it is was the theme, and it was just enjoyed by all. And to hear all the teens' stories just makes it all that more interesting. So thank you for attending that. Also, Youth Council has been invited to host the Teen Board Exchange in August, and this is an exchange of city teen and youth boards put on by the Southern California Teen Coalition. And they'll be hosting about 15 other agencies, a couple-day event, and they'll be coming to visit our town and have their annual conference. So Diego wanted you to know that also as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. That's all good. I'll be interested to hear about the teen board exchange, maybe a little bit more. Maybe that'd be something we could get some information on and
Perhaps at the
you know,
August meeting would be
drop in and see some of their
Okay.
events and
Thank you.
things. Okay, so that takes us to the consent calendar. Are there any questions or comments on the summary of council actions? I think one of the items will be on our agenda tonight, the charter amendments. Okay, seeing no comments, it moves us to the approval of minutes. And we have two sets of minutes.
I move that we waive the reading of the minutes for the regular meeting of April 22nd and the special meeting of April 3rd and approve both.
Is there a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously, and that brings us...
Next abstention.
One abstention, okay. Brings us to Street Tree Advisory Committee items. Mr. Downey.
Bear with me. Chair Longstreet, Commissioners, the sole item on the agenda is Washington Robusta Mexican fan palm located on the property line of 2725 and 2729 Portofino Way. The tree is about 35 to 40 feet tall with about 15 to 18 feet of dead fronds on it. The tree slightly leans towards the east, but there are no safety issues with its leaning. The Street Advisory Committee and staff determined that the only issue is that it needs to be trimmed, which is a maintenance issue, and recommend denial.
Okay, are there any questions for Mr. Downey? Entertain a motion.
Move to concur with the recommendation of the Street Tree Advisory Committee.
Second.
Okay, any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. And now that brings us to old business. Item 5, proposed 2010 Parks and Recreation Department budget for action. Ms. Rapp.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, while we're at the next phase of our budget review, tonight we're asking you to develop and make your recommendations to City Council on the Parks and Recreation Department budget, which includes the three components, the Golf Fund, the Creeks Fund, and the General Fund, and also to include the capital improvement budget, and also the fees and charges schedule as proposed. And I wanted to just, there are several components of what we'll cover tonight from staff as just an update for you. We'll review the recommendations that you have in your packet from the various advisory committees that have a role in making recommendations on the fees and charges. As a courtesy for the Commission, we've included some information that was asked of staff either as part of our budget presentation to City Council or following that. And I wanted to just cover kind of next steps for us, so I'll do that at the end. I did want to just start out with, because this was very important to us and it was a discussion with the Commission with our budget. As you know, we had 4 people who are planned to be laid off with our proposed budget. So a total loss of almost 13 positions, but 4 of those were layoffs. So I'm very pleased to say that one of the people, our landscape architect, Billy Goodnick, has announced his retirement and is actually looking forward to taking his career to the next phase, working as a private consultant and a number of other things. We've actually had 3 employees, so 2 who were scheduled for layoff and 1 who is one of our park staff that interviewed and accepted jobs with Public Works. And so we're very pleased that those staff have found a place to land. And we have 1 additional person who is scheduled for layoff, and it is her intent to remain with that program and work as an hourly employee. At this point in her life, that's what works best for her. So that was very important to us. We're very pleased that we're able to find places for people to land who were interested in staying with the city. So that was really good news.
And it speaks well to the staff that you have, too, that they were snapped up by other.
We told Public Works they got some of our keepers. Those were hard losses for us.
And I think it would be nice if we could somehow celebrate Billy Goodnick's retirement here, either at the commission or if we can give him something, some sort of award at his retirement.
We'll have Billy come to the June commission meeting, and he's asked for a very quiet, simple retirement. I know. So we'll have more information on that.
Okay.
But we will ask him to come to the June commission meeting.
Thank you.
So let me just start out with the advisory committee recommendations that you have. You do have all of the memos that we received from the various advisory committees. As mentioned as part of the earlier discussion, we did have 3 advisory committees that did not have a quorum, and so that includes active adults, the adapted recreation, and aquatics. So those 3 committees not having a quorum did not have any recommendations. And 2 of those committees, and I'll just say as part of the other discussion, active adults and aquatics have not met regularly for some time. So that'll be part of that next discussion. The arts and crafts show we did not propose any fee increases, so they were appreciative of that, and they did urge the Park and Recreation Commission to reconsider the hourly art show monitors. We have had traditionally 2, and we are proposing to reduce that to 1 as a budget savings. So they commented on that. And the Creeks Advisory Committee unanimously approved the Creeks Division budget. There was a discussion that was in response to our council presentation, and I'll cover that item later, but the potentially shifting of the beach cleaning from the general fund over to Measure B, and the Creeks Committee recommended against that cost shift, particularly as it relates to this budget, and expressed concern that such a shift would inappropriately violate the intent and purpose of the Measure B and would set a poor precedent for future funding decisions. So, so that we'll talk a little bit more about that. The Franklin Neighborhood Center Advisory Committee approved the fees and charges. They also recommended an increase in the damage deposit from $130 to $200 for each of the community centers Staff did not support that recommendation. Just for your information, they did not feel it was necessary, but we appreciate their recommendation and concern for the condition of the community centers. The Golf Advisory Committee unanimously voted to support the operating and capital budgets for the Golf Division. The Lower West Side Community Center Advisory Committee, in your report, the Lower West Side Community Advisory Committee and the West Side Community Center Advisory Committee, those comments got switched. And so the way that should read is that the West Side Community Center Advisory Committee unanimously agreed with the proposed fees and charges, but recommended that no further increases in fees and charges occur for the next 3 to 5 years based on the housing cost in Santa Barbara. And the Lower West Side Advisory Committee unanimously voted not to support the proposed fees and charges as presented. They felt that the state of the economy and how increasing fees will have negative effects on the community's access to programs and facilities. And lastly, the Tennis Advisory Committee agrees with the proposed tennis fee increases. They feel that they're appropriate, with the exception of the annual permit fee. And this is a discussion that committee has had before, and so they have agreed to, in the coming year, evaluate a new annual fee permit structure and to work with staff to make a proposal for the future. And once again, they recommend that the resident discount program be eliminated.
I see what we get when we appoint Mr. Purcell to that committee. We hear you, Steve.
So moving on to, and first I should just ask, are there any questions about the advisory committee recommendations? If not, I'll move on to the council items. As I mentioned, in attachment 2, staff was asked to respond to some proposals and to provide some additional information. One of the recommendations as currently proposed with the city administrator's budget is to shift $200,000 of the cost of the downtown organization State Street maintenance contract to downtown parking. So from the general fund, which occurs in our budget, to downtown parking. And that would be a savings to the general fund. And it was suggested that council consider, from the dais, it was suggested that council consider increasing that $200,000 to 50% of the contract cost. And so we're providing the cost of what that would be in the fiscal year 2010 budget, which would be about $313,000 instead of the $200,000. So council will have that as part of their discussion.
I need to go back a minute. I'm a little slow on the uptake tonight, but just a second, back to arts and crafts and the monitor. We have 2 monitors. We're going down to 1. In their memo, what they mention is the skate park monitor. Is that a request in addition to their both monitors? I see Ms. McCaffrey shaking her head. Yes.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Burns.
Actually, I think she has the information.
Yes, Commissioner, I just want to answer that question. Actually, in their recommendations, they didn't address the 1 hourly art show monitor that we're not scheduling on Sundays. Actually, that occurred starting in March.
Okay.
Their actual comments in their memo related to the fact that skateboard park monitors on Sundays have been cut, and they expressed concern about not having those monitors in the skate park on Sundays when a large portion of the show is set up around the skate park.
One more question. As far as I know, the skate park monitors stay in the skate park, though. They do not monitor sidewalk skating or any of that, right? Okay. Thank you. Okay, now you can go back.
Sorry for the confusion. One of the council members inquired of staff what the impact would be to suspending the capital program for 1 year. The majority of the proposed capital program for the general fund is Parks and Recreation projects. And so in our written response to you, we identified those projects and talked about the impacts, which are fairly, significant in that we have such a backlog of projects to accomplish. And also, we are concerned that any further reduction in the Parks and Recreation capital program may result in us proposing or having to do another layoff in that position. And I know that that is not a desire of council. So that recommendation, that information is being forwarded to council as well.
Not only will it result possibly in a layoff, but it may result in the closure of parks. I think that's the real critical thing to enforce to the council, is that if Shoreline Park is not fenced properly, we don't have an option here. That's it. That's just, it has to be fenced properly. The playgrounds that are in need of repair, you either repair them or you close them. So it's not, this is not a wish list, this is a have-to-do list, and it's only part of what has to be done in our park. So, I mean, that would be my strong comment, would be that this could result in closure.
I'd like to agree and say that we're talking safety. These are safety issues, and I would have to agree with Bibi on that. Thank you.
And for the benefit of the commission, because you will be approving the capital budget, I'll just revisit the projects that are proposed. $50,000 for fence and sidewalk replacement in Shoreline Park from the landslide. $50,000 for the replacement of the lower portion of the Mesa Lane steps. As you know, that's a multi-year project, so this is just starting that. And $237,000 for the renovation of the large restroom at Oak Park, which would also bring it into ADA compliance. And $145,000 for a new playground next to the West Beach wading pool as part of our 10-year playground replacement program. So those are the projects that are currently proposed for funding.
Maybe we can talk, maybe I'm jumping the gun and we can talk about this when we move on, but the one of those projects that does jump out at me is not necessarily about safety or maintenance, is building a new playground. Did I miss something in that? Or, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm pro playground, but Councilmember Horton does have a point that maybe this year isn't the year to be taking on a lot of new projects.
I know that Mr. Escobar is here and can speak to it, but I'll try to just address it succinctly, and if you have additional questions, I'll have him talk to it. We do have a 10-year replacement schedule so that our playgrounds stay up to code. Our options are, and usually we replace the playground, and that's how we address that, by replacing the playground. Over those 10 years, if we have an element to the playground that becomes unsafe, we may look at just removing it, or just replacing that one element in order to keep the playground whole. Those are options for this year. As a reminder, we did already take budget reductions in the current year for playground replacements as well. So we have to be very careful about how far behind we get with our playground replacements.
But I think that's the issue. It says in here new playground, but we're really replacing. There is already a playground there.
Yes.
I would change that word for a replacement playground, because it sounds like we're going out and developing a new thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the issue.
Thank you. We'll make that correction.
Mr. Burns?
But it is an option. As we looked at that, we considered that as well. You know, I mean, if we didn't have funds to replace the playground, we would either just remove the elements that are not up to code or remove the playground entirely until such time as it could be funded. So there are options, not the preferred option, obviously, but there are options.
Mr. Burns?
Well, one of the things I'd like to bring up as we're looking at this capital program, it's already been cut into very small pieces. Our funding is so poor that we probably have $20 million worth of capital improvements we'd love to do that we just don't have money for. So when we're looking at a $500,000, we're not saying this is the wish list. We've already cut the wish list out with a lot of programs. We're down to the bare necessities. The $50,000 for Shoreline Park is, just a really Band-Aid. I mean, if that the bathroom gets a little tweaked, it suddenly it's going to be shut down. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff we'd love to do that we can't, and I hope that City Council doesn't look at this as a line item they can start and cut.
Just on that particular playground, we will have no other wading pools. That is going to be the Oak Park will be closed for the summer. We don't have a wading pool at Ortega any longer. This is our only wading pool, and we need a playground next to it. That makes it a real play area. If we take it out, then we've kind of got playground here and wading pool here, and so I would stand beside that one over some other things that happen in the world.
Yeah, I'm just mad because they got rid of the pirate ship that was there when I was a kid.
Okay, and when you design it, let's put the pirate ship back in. Maybe you can get a boat out of the harbor and just be cheaper.
Sure, there's some for sale, pretty cheap.
Okay, Ms. Rapp, we'll get serious again.
Both at the commission meeting and at the city council budget presentation for Parks and Recreation, we had public speakers, and I believe you have some people this evening to speak about their concern for the proposed reductions in the swim program. One being the Sunday lap swim program at Los Baños, and that was the primary reduction that was discussed. So council asked that we do two things: look at what was the cost to reinstate that service, and to clarify the number of people impacted by the service. So the lap swim program is offered 7 days a week at Los Baños, and on Sundays, that's the only program that takes place, it provided the department the greatest opportunity to have budget savings by closing Los Baños on that day. The cost to reinstate that program on Sundays would be $4,420. And the records show that the average number of Sunday lap swimmers is about 47 people. And with the reduction on Sundays, 24.5 hours of lap swim time remains. Just today, we had a very positive meeting with the president of the Friends of Los Baños and Ms. Monica Jones, who is here to speak this evening. Ms. Jones has heralded an effort to fundraise both for the Sunday lap swim program, but also for reinstating the rec swim at Ortega Park Pool. And so she's expressed a willingness to undertake a community fundraising effort. We met with both of those with both Ms. Jones and the Friends of Los Baños president to talk about that, and we're very appreciative of their efforts to undertake a fundraising campaign, and so we will work with them and to the extent that is possible, work with them to fundraise to reinstate those two services. So we believe that, we can't do it without people like Ms. Jones and people who are willing to step forward and help us with our funding our programs and our services. These are tough times, so we really appreciate that. We also discussed whether in the future we might work with them to raise the money for the Oak Park wading pool repair. So we're going to try one, see how it works, and if we feel like there's momentum there and they feel like that's something that they can do, they'll consider that.
Well, I would just like to say thank you. A lot of times we have organized groups, be they tennis or golf, adult sports users is a better way to put it, who are able to organize and able to fundraise and do it only for themselves and their own benefit. And I really appreciate the idea of bringing along the kids, of the people that are more vulnerable in our budget always. So I'm very appreciative of that aspect of it. So I would say thank you very much.
And another item that council asked us to follow up on, and I just received a letter from the zoo director. So Councilmember Williams expressed interest in exploring if the general fund commitment as part of the city's agreement, long-term lease with the zoo, could be reduced. And currently, the city's 25-year lease with the zoo provides annual general fund support for a portion of the zoo's water use and also grounds maintenance. And that amount is budgeted in the Parks Division. The estimate for 2010 is about $158,000. I've been having discussions with Rich Block, the zoo director, for a while, and he's been talking with his board. They are very, and the letter formally expresses a desire to enter early renegotiation discussions for their contract, and they would be willing to consider a 3-year phased reduction of that general fund support. And at the same time, we'll be talking about what some of the focus areas are for the next 25-year lease. We look forward to developing even a further partnership with the zoo that benefits both Parks and Recreation, the city, and the zoo. So we'll look forward to that. Potentially, that could provide about $50,000 in additional savings for fiscal year 2010. As mentioned earlier, there was a suggestion by one of the council members, Councilmember Falcone, about exploring the feasibility of shifting the beach cleaning costs, which are currently in the Parks Division budget general fund, over to Measure B. And staff did, during our budget presentation, remind the council that from the inception of the Creeks program, the premise has been that the funds would not be used to replace currently funded efforts by the city, and that it has been how the program has operated over the years. And we had the opportunity, the Creeks Advisory Committee was also making their budget recommendations at their meeting on May 13th. And so their comment to the council was that while they were sympathetic with the city's current budget challenges, committee members expressed unanimous concern about the proposal, concluding that, and as I said before, the shift would inappropriately violate the intent and purpose of Measure B. And I believe that in order to, if that is an issue that the council wants to revisit in the future, then we'll probably need to revisit the policy that the Creeks Advisory Committee has operated under these many years that that they've been making decisions and recommendations on Measure B funds. So, and the other question that we had was the impact, talking more comprehensively about the impact of a 40% service reduction to park and facility trees. And if I could ask Jill Zachary to come up and speak to this item. Councilmember Schneider talked about her concern about the reductions to the program that had already taken place and wanted to know exactly what further reductions would mean to park and facility trees. So just what the full impact of the budget reduction would be. Ms. Zachary?
Chair Longstreet and members of the Commission, as you will remember, for this fiscal year, we did reduce the forestry program budget both at the beginning of the year and mid-year to address the mid-year challenges that the cities had, citywide challenges. And our concern at that time is the forestry budget is comprised of revenue from the general fund, which is solely for park and facility trees. And we have about 12,000 park and facility trees. The remaining funding does come from utility users tax, which is dedicated for street tree maintenance. And so there's a fairly distinct line between the two. So when we do take a reduction, it is in the general fund, which obviously goes to our park and facility trees. Councilmember Schneider's concern was based on the fact that we did take reductions this year. And those reductions we've tried to offset by redirecting some of our park staff to facilitate with smaller pruning jobs. We have had the opportunity to have volunteer assistance. And we've focused our efforts on trees that require limited pruning. Looking into fiscal year 2010, our estimate of up to a 40% reduction is really based on our prediction of the type of pruning that we will be focused on. We are proposing that we will not prune palm trees, as an example, for Fiesta. That we will reduce the amount of pruning in our coastal park areas, which are largely palms, that will focus our facility tree pruning. And when we talk about facilities, we're talking about all the city facilities, City Hall, the libraries, the police department, the Public Works, Community Development buildings, that block. We maintain the trees and the landscape there. That we would focus those pruning efforts on trees that are over entrances and exits. So a real focus on, how does the tree interact with Santa Barbara residents or Santa Barbara visitors, and look at aesthetics as a secondary consideration, safety as a primary consideration. We are similarly concerned. We realize this is a challenge to undertake in terms of this reduction, it could, over the long term, have effects on our urban forest program in general, but we're trying to mitigate those impacts in a way that seems to have the least impact on residents and park users. Unfortunately, we're faced with this situation, and our focus will remain on the key trees that are most important. Some trees are relatively easy to prune, so the cost to prune that tree might not be that much, but more complicated trees, the cost is higher to prune, and that's where we come up with an estimated 40% reduction, because it can float depending on what the need is. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
No, just they will need to be pruned the next year if they're not pruned this year. So it's one of those, I think we just are putting off the inevitable. It's another capital type expense. So thank you.
And the last item, there were a large number of speakers at the council budget presentation representing the Youth Council and teens, expressing concern over the impacts to teen programs that the proposed neighborhood and outreach services model would have. And so staff has prepared some additional information which we're sharing with you and which we'll be sharing with City Council. And I've asked Ms. Hanna to give you an overview of the specific impacts, program impacts, so people have a good understanding of what really is being proposed.
Thank you.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, excuse me. This packet that I left at your spot is what will be going forward to City Council for more information for them. As you can see, it reiterates some of the things that we talked about in the initial budget session about the purpose and the positive opportunities that are made available by merging these two very strong program areas. And then in attachment 1, I tried to quantify some of the major program areas. And if you read across on the document, for each of the program areas, something that we may have are continuing or is modifying or it's being reduced or it's a new opportunity is indicated there. So it's reading across in case it is a little bit confusing. So I want to go to that right now. One of the, beginning with Youth Council, which had been proposed by the Teens program supervisor to reduce the Youth Council meetings from twice a month to once a month. And this is because they are Brown Act meetings and it is a very heavy workload with a committee that is 20 members strong. It's often difficult to keep them organized and on task. So that was one of the early proposals to help reduce staff workload. Also, there is a strong new opportunity for Youth Council to work with the community center advisory committees to increase youth voice and perhaps look at the makeup of the Youth Council and maybe shift to have better representation for some of the neighborhoods that are underserved at this time, or where we really need to have additional youth and teens coming forward and bringing their ideas forward to us. So that's a very significant opportunity in this reorganization and merger. I didn't say this at the first, but as you can see, there are many programs that are continuing, and most programs are continuing. So I'm really only going to highlight the ones that are being modified or reduced and those that are new. And if you have other questions, I'd be happy to answer them. 1235 Teen Center, we are proposing to close it on Saturdays. It's a low-use day, and this was proposed as one of the budget reductions. We are also planning to have an enhanced marketing program for those Saturdays and Sunday weekend rentals for youth and teens. It's an opportunity for folks to have an inexpensive place, a really fun place to go where they can have 40 people come to a special event or a youth party or something like that. Leadership activities are a very important aspect of teen programs right now, as you've seen at the leadership banquet, and youth making a difference in our community through community service and assisting the lives of others. We do find that it does centralize kind of around Youth Council, and that perhaps there is an opportunity to move this out also into the other underserved neighborhoods and give some empowering leadership activities at the Franklin Center and the West Side Center in the future. Susan Young has been very active in coordinating a Santa Barbara Teen Coalition, and it's a service network of teen service providers. And we expect this to continue to grow and expand. But one of the issues that came forward when we were forming the South Coast Gang Task Force is that often the agencies don't link with each other, and their programs, they don't know about each other's programs. So we're going to try to use this as an avenue also to improve the efficiency of having teen providers reach at-risk youth and have more information that's out there about what services they provide. So that is a very important part of the Teen Coalition. Great group of nonprofit organizations, folks from school district, all kinds of different levels of providers for youth. There was one of the concerns that was voiced very strongly by the teen programs and youth council participants, is that they were afraid that they were going to be losing their identity, that teen programs was going to go away, and they had worked so hard to build teen programs in the teen center that they didn't want this identity to go away. And we want to assure the participants and youth council that that is in fact not the case, that teen programs will continue on in its look, its feel, its logo, its branding, and they will continue their own identity within the merger. They will just become an aspect of neighborhood and outreach services. But in a new way, we will be targeting more marketing to the underserved neighborhood youth and teen areas that may not be learning about some of the city programs that go on. I think if you ask the youth council, they wouldn't be aware of some of the community service programs that go on, and vice versa. So it's really bringing two parallels together and letting them intertwine a bit more to reach more youth. In recreation activities, this is also another area of concern. We are shifting some of our resources from some of the activities that take place, some of the more costly activities that have perhaps low participation. We haven't completely decided what our plan is, because we want to work with the Youth Council, the advisory committees, to determine what our programming will be. But it was proposed early on by the teen program supervisor to make some reductions in dances, in concerts, and excursions. Some of those opportunities will be picked up by collaborators, and like Friday Night Live and such, and we can add them back in. But we really are looking to shifting programming to the neighborhoods, from the broad-based recreation activities back to the neighborhood centers and to serving those youth in those areas. The youth employment program, part of the community services as it now stands, this is not completely new, but we are designating the 0.8 full-time equivalent coordinator to conduct this program, designating his full-time. He used to work part-time at the Lower West Side Center. As you know, the Lower West Side Center lease is being terminated, and we are going to refocus on him on networking with other youth job service providers, with grant funding, with outreach, with job skills training. He is working very closely with the Workforce Investment Board at this time. And so this is a very important area to teens, and one of the number one things that we hear from teens is that they want jobs. So we really are changing our focus of this position to really focus right on youth employment and everything that we can do within our community to bring providers together and expand youth programming. The community service programs, for the most part, are continuing, staying the same. They may be able to be enhanced because there's going to be additional teen services. But the two main areas that we are kind of looking at is working with our advisory committees to determine a way, restructure to become more effective, possibly moving to neighborhood councils, but we don't want to determine that for them. So we will be working with the advisory committees, Citizen Voice, the Parks and Recreation Commission, and some of our other community leaders to determine what's the best way to improve our neighborhood voice and make sure resident priorities are moving forward. I wanted to also, it's not on this table, but reiterate, and if you go to the org chart, that there is only one reduction in this merger of a permanent staff person, and we presented this at the budget when we gave you the budget earlier, and that is an administrative specialist that was previously worked at the West Side Center. So all of the other staff is being retained. The org chart, as I have presented, does not include a part-time grounds maintenance worker and a part-time office specialist that also support the neighborhood and outreach services model. So with that, just the last bit, it's going to take a while to phase these programs in and to make concrete decisions as to how it's going to work. And staff is working together to try and make the best determinations about efficiency, not duplicating tasks and responsibilities, but it will be something that's going to be evolving. And so we are going to be phasing it in over a period of time. We will be counting on our advisory committees to assist us with some of those determinations, and yourself. But we really look forward to this opportunity, and it's, you know, an important change that doesn't happen very often. And so we're really looking forward to it. Because there were so many questions brought up by youth and the Youth Council at the City Council budget hearing, we are planning to meet with them and go through this very document so that they understand more fully that we're not really taking things away, but we're really adding things, and we do have, you know, increase the opportunities to serve teens throughout the community. So this coming week, we're not sure exactly what day, June 2nd or June 9th, we probably will be meeting. It will be a Brown Act meeting, so it will be well noticed. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone might have.
Ms. Connor?
Sarah, will that meeting be the meeting that was canceled due to the fire, or will we be a part of that, or?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Connor, we have decided that we want to meet with Youth Council first so that they can really flesh out all their questions and not have it be in such a large forum. But then we will be going back to have a joint advisory committee meeting. I know each of the community center advisory committees are anxious to meet and hear what the proposals are. We have met with the chairs, but you know, we needed to get out to all of the members on the committees.
Okay, great. Also, I just wanted to say, I think this is very well thought out. I'm very excited about this. I know that a lot of collaborations that are taking place in the community now are moving in the neighborhood direction. And I think that this is a really positive way to do it. And I'm very excited about it. And it'll be interesting to watch as it unfolds, because I feel very optimistic about it. Thanks. Thanks for the nice presentation.
Mr. Burns?
Just a quick question or a comment. At the Youth Council meeting tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 here, on their agenda they're putting down Park and Rec Commission. So it may be they're thinking you're going to talk a little bit tomorrow?
Well, we had asked for them to get back to us with a date, but if we're on the meeting notice, we'll be here. So that's fantastic.
Commissioner Laramore-Hall, did you have any comments?
I'm very, as I've said many times, I think this is an incredibly important direction that we're moving in. It's always uncomfortable when there's a constituency that is nervous about being disempowered. I don't actually think that that young people will be disempowered through this process at all. And in fact, I think quite the opposite. But it always feels like it's going to be when institutions shift around. So, you know, I'm just going to be very interested in how the discussion goes through the Youth Council, and very interested to know, like, what really specifically people are nervous about. So, the more that the more that everyone who's sort of engaging with the Youth Council can try to get at what the specific concerns are. It would be, I think, helpful for us as a commission to help think through. You know, for example, is it moving from a sort of schools-based system of representation to a neighborhood model? Is that what really the crux of discomfort is? And then, like, more, why is that? You know, why are some young folks a little more comfortable with kind of organizing through school networks versus neighborhood networks, et cetera? So thinking about it that way, the more specific concerns that people raise, I think the easier it's going to be to tailor the specifics of this reorganization around it. And I'm very excited to be part of that discussion.
And thank you for this. This is a good explanation of it. We had a joint meeting 2 years ago, advisory committees and commission, and this very specific thing was brought up.
Actually, it was the night of the Tea Fire.
No.
And then after it was.
No, we had one at the Franklin Center.
Oh, okay.
Where Diego's mother brought up how we needed more services at the centers. We heard it loud and clear from, all 3 centers that we needed to have more site-based youth programming. So I'm here sort of to remind them of that. It's scary when it happens, as Daraka said, but this came out of the seeds of those requests. I have perceived both at the council meeting and again at the youth banquet that one of the fears is that Susan Young's job is in jeopardy. And that is such misinformation. So I think that when we quell that misinformation, things will be a little calmer. Personally, I see this particular model as a way to save that position, not dispense with it. And it's going to require staff to engage with each other in a whole new way that's going to be, I think, a lot more dynamic. So I think it is going to be a challenge. They have their work cut out for them. I think they're all able to do it, and I think out of that push and pull is going to come some real good ideas and some good work. We've kind of run these parallel tracks for several years now. We have the teen program, and that's a track, and then we have what goes on in the centers, which is in many cases focused of job programming and things, the mural programs focused on teens, and now we're saying, you are all teens, you are all together. I really like the idea that we're operating in both sides of the city and the center, and we can maybe bring these kids together. This east and west side thing, it's almost like as adults we perpetuate it, just by where our centers are. So, I mean, there's a whole myriad of problems that I'm hoping we'll be able to address. I don't think we're going to solve everything overnight, but we can at least be looking at them. So, thank you for bringing this forward. I hope that they hear our commitment to it loud and clear in the reasoning, because I think it's, it has come from the community and from young people and our advisory committee. So,
Chair Longstreet and Commission, I do think it's important, and I think, we tried to portray this when we presented the proposal, but I think, more and more, and Commissioner Connor referred to it, this model of a neighborhood-based program is really the state-of-the-art model that cities who are successfully improving outcomes for families and youth in underserved neighborhoods are implementing and making change in this neighborhood model. And that is really there are 2 drivers for making this change. One, we had to cut staff and resources and meet our budget requirement. That's one. But 2, and it would have happened anyway, is the city's interest in moving forward this neighborhood concept to improve outcomes in our underserved neighborhoods. And that is our primary focus with this effort. And I say that because it does mean we may move away from some of the activities that have been more broad in nature, and Ms. Hanna referred to that. But it's because we need to focus limited resources where we get the greatest impact in changing lives. And that is the reason for moving forward with neighborhood and outreach services. And I just attended, actually last week, several of our staff joined in for a teleconference that was put on by the National League of Cities, where we had a presentation from 4 or 5 cities that have very successfully implemented this model in different formats over a period of years and seen positive outcomes. And then also locally, the United Way has, with their Power of Partnership initiative, come to this same resolution and has a community effort to move forward the neighborhood model. And so we're very excited about the possibility of pulling those two efforts together and working together to improve the outcomes for our youth and families. So I think it's important to come back to the big picture, and that's really what we're proposing here with this model. So.
Well, I hope council looks closely at where this is headed and why it's headed there, and stands to the fear and lets the model move forward, because I think you're on the right track, or we are on the right track, because you guys aren't doing it alone. And I think it's going to take everybody, and I think we value all the residents of Santa Barbara, and we need everybody on board for these kinds of things. So thank you. I think we will meet. If the Youth Council wants to meet with the Commission, please extend that. We will sit down. We can do it in a more informal work session. I mean, it still has to be noticed, but rather than here where we can have a more give and take. But we're open for that. I think we are very strong behind this proposal. So thank you.
And that concludes the staff report. I don't know if the Commission would like to take public comment.
Yes,
and then move on to their deliberation.
They probably didn't know they were going to get to sit through this much of a budget hearing. I would call Monica Jones. Yeah, I know, I was here too. Monica Jones will be followed by Pat Costello. So if Monica. Okay.
The other people unfortunately had to leave.
Okay. If you just give us your name for the record, please.
Barbara Newman.
I beg pardon?
Barbara Newman.
Barbara Newman, okay.
I taught swimming in England for 30 years. It's compulsory for school children there to learn to swim from the age of 5 to 10, and also adults. And I know how important it is for them to be able to go to a pool and just play. It's not just all lessons, it's playtime as well. In fact, it's probably more important than the lessons. And also, if you learn to swim, sometimes you give it up for a lot of years, but when you're older, I speak for all the older people at Los Baños. It's important. It's the only sport that you can do, no matter how old you are. There was a man of 100 on the television the other day still swimming and winning medals. And if you learn when you're younger, it's so much easier than when you're adult, as everything else is. So I would like to say that if you can keep as many wading pools, paddling pools, swimming pools as open as possible, I think that would be really, really good. Thanks.
Thank you. And I assume Pat Costello is gone? Are you Pat?
No, I'm Monica.
Monica, okay.
The others apologized. They had children and they had to go.
That's okay. We
I
understand.
will hand you this. I probably could have given it to you before, but for your information.
Well, you need to talk into the mic, otherwise you're not on the air. And if you'd state your name for it.
My name's Monica Jones. I'm happy to be here. I am a member of the board of Los Baños. I was at the city council meeting, and I had gone there to say that I thought it was really important to keep the Sunday swim open. And I saw the wonderful PowerPoint presentation by Parks and Rec, and saying, I'm speaking up for Los Baños, and then I see on it that they are going to cut the recreational swim at Ortega. And I thought to myself, that is really, in a sense, even more important than the Los Baños people. I did say, and I think it's true, that the Sunday swim for Los Baños is very important. I said, if you close the golf course on Sunday, you would have outrage. And I was told that's other funding, but that's not the point. If you close the parks or you close anything, the tennis courts on Sundays, this isn't really the day to do it. And there has been a lot of talk among the swimmers, and they had hoped, and I was fortunate to have the meeting with Marty Bloom and Nancy and Rick Hanna today to discuss the whole thing. Ideally, I would hope that the monies would be found, or that at least people could meet me part way, Los Baños swimmers part way on this. If it can't be done, then it would fall upon the Los Baños people to raise the $4,000+ to keep Los Baños open for Sunday swimming. I should say, however, for those of you who don't remember, that in the beginning of the 1990s, somebody discovered that on the master plan for the city, somebody had planned a grandiose harbor entrance, and they were going to tear down Los Baños. And that is when we originally organized. And the Friends of Los Baños have raised over $1 million, close to $1.5 million. And most of that money went into refurbishing of Los Baños. Since then, we have provided equipment like pull buoys, kickboards, also the benches at Los Baños, and we have given money for swim lessons. However, it is not within our charter that we can simply provide money to keep the pool open for more hours. And therefore, it was decided that we would start a special fund, and with this special fund, we are trying to raise the money to keep Los Baños open on Sundays. The area that you mentioned of greater concern, and I think it's an area of greater concern to the whole community, and that's the lucky thing about going last, you get to hear what other people say. But I think for children and for teens, having the opportunity to swim is really important. And therefore, I think Ortega is crucial. We talked about the Oak Park wading pool, which is used by 4 times as many people as the wading pool by Los Baños, but that's $30,000, and even if one raised the money, one couldn't get it together now. So I think what we're faced now with is looking at the Ortega situation. And I have asked Parks and Rec, and I think they have agreed with me that we're not going to print any flyers in the next couple of weeks saying we're closing things or changing hours. They're just going to hang on to that. But people within the community were outraged at the idea that Ortega recreational swim would end, and I'm with President Obama on this. I think we may disagree on principles or where cuts should be made, but I think we should work together. So I have had people sitting on their hands and covering their mouths for a few weeks saying, let's wait and see how far we can get and what we can do. Where we are right now is we've had approval from the meeting that we had with Marty Bloom and the other people this morning that we would wait on public announcements on these things. We have people ready to go. We have radio stations ready to speak who could have spoken in outrage, but now they're willing to say, we would like people within the community to help raise money. We have churches who have told me that I can hand out my flyers or they can hand out their flyers, because to get community involvement, even if people simply give $5 or $10, lots of $5 and $10 go a long way. And when you lovely people join, and we'll make sure you've done so, see, you will be informed, but you will also be part of it. I mean, it's just too easy to say somebody else is going to do all of that. We also have one of the businesses in town They have the whole list of the people in Chamber of Commerce, and they are willing and able, as a nonprofit contribution, to send out a bulk mailing to everybody in the Chamber of Commerce. I've talked to the Athletic Roundtable, and there are various corporations in town who I'm told don't have a lot of money, but I would say we can try to hit them up for $250 or something. It's a lot of money to raise in a short period of time, but I really think it can be done, and I think it's a matter of getting the community behind it. And I would also welcome the names of any people you have within, particularly within the Latino community, who might be able to help with this. And the teen council people, there may be people there who are willing to go door to door or rustle up a little bit of money. But I think the swimming is very important. I will finally say that my husband didn't learn to swim well, and he nearly drowned at the age of 47. And he learned how to swim at Los Baños, and he's now 72, and he swims 1,000 meters 3 to 4 times a week. So it can be done. But I have said before, all this city needs is one more drowning of a child. You know, this is money well spent. And if you would like to change your recommendations and not make it so hard on the Friends to raise this money, we would be grateful.
Thank you.
And we appreciate your help and support.
We appreciate yours. Thank you very much. You know, everything you said, the other part of it is every child that learns to swim then has access to free recreation at our beaches. So it goes beyond the pools, you know, but they have to be safe. So, okay, thank you very much. And that brings it back to the commission. I'll close the public comment for our recommendations. Now, Ms. Jones mentioned something, and I just need to clarify with this fundraising effort. At this point, we really just it can slide in at the last minute. We can just support that the community is out there doing things, and you know that we have to go with what we have, but we support the community activities. Or help me.
Chair Longstreet and Commission, I've encouraged Ms. Jones to speak to the priorities for the community, and that this is the appropriate venue to talk about how important those programs are. It is difficult to make a change to the proposed budget, because it does mean that we probably need to look at choosing a different thing to cut. But I also know from, other council presentations thus far that there are other people in the community coming forward and asking for consideration for other reductions. So I'll leave that with you. We were very, very pleased at how the meeting went this morning, and the Friends of Los Baños has agreed to, I'm going to use the term front the money, but they've agreed to enter into a legally binding document with the city, which is what we do with our co-sponsors, where there's the exchange of services and money. They have agreed to be the vehicle for that. They have agreed to take on that responsibility and the risk of the fundraising. So our agreement will be with the Friends of Los Baños, but we will work with Ms. Jones in her effort and help in any way we can to help support the fundraising effort. So I guess it's twofold. One, the Friends of Los Baños has agreed to take on the commitment for funding of those two programs. And Ms. Jones in her comments was asking for the commission to consider whether they would recommend to restore all or part of that funding for those programs. And that can be a commission discussion.
Okay. Commissioner.
So the figures of 40, 4,400, and 8,600. These are for the FY10 year. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
I mean, obviously we need to have general discussion, but on this particular issue, and obviously we can't do public policy or budget decisions just based on who shows up in a room. But I do think that when a group of people who are adversely affected by cuts approach the department and want to work together in terms of bringing new revenue in or fundraising to save something that none of us want to cut, that it does make sense for us to reward that kind of community organizing. So, I mean, with that in mind, I certainly would vote for a proposal to restore a small amount of the funding that's scheduled to be cut for FY10 from both of the swimming programs as a sign of good faith, in encouragement of folks that are organizing around this. I don't know exactly what that number would be offhand, but I'm agnostic about that. But in particular, because it does seem like there's at least a couple of proposals that are being kicked around in council that may end up saving the general fund in fiscal year 2010. Certainly more than a couple of $1,000s. I do think that it would be appropriate for us to put our money where our mouth is a little bit and reward that kind of organizing.
Well, I think there's a couple of issues too here. We may not have money in the budget to put in this year, but we welcome and want to work with the volunteer groups and strongly support that effort. We need that. We need that in the Rose Society. We need that at Friends of Los Baños. We need that in 100 areas. So, those are, I think, a little bit separate as to whether we are able to put money in, or whether we're strong, but we are always strongly behind the effort. I think, the Friends may reinstate the Sunday lap swim and have an ongoing project with that'll help us with Oak Park wading pool, or Ortega, or whatever, however they move forward. I think it's tremendous for us to have a group that will assist, and thank you. So I think, I would be willing to just to voice our strong support of this partnership, and maybe we leave it at if there is excess in the budget, or if this is one of our priorities to put some funding towards as
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Larimore Hall, and this was not discussed this morning, but perhaps the department could contribute in other ways to help the fundraising campaign that might make more of a significant difference, either working with the Friends of Los Baños to host an event at Los Baños. There may be a way to help contribute in that way. Those are things that we can look at in the future.
And can they advertise on City TV? I mean, that
we could partner with them to make that happen.
I mean, that's another good venue on Channel 18 to be able to get the word out about what's going on. I mean, it's so important. I mean, my kids learned to swim at Ortega and Los Baños, and I think that they're really important jewels. And yes, we're pool short here for a community that is a water community, and so Ortega is a great loss. I think it really serves, again, a very underserved population on the east side. So it leaves them without any pool services, because I don't think the high school will be open to rec swim this summer. I would, maybe. Okay. So we need to come up with some recommendations to formulate our recommendations on the budget. And I think I went to the council meeting, and the things that I said there, I still stand behind, and that we, I think, should make a strong statement about our facilities, about what the department maintains, and why it is important to keep maintaining the things that we are in charge of. And I think we have talked about the infrastructure. We're fortunate to have Mr. Burns, our infrastructure expert, but we need to, we've also talked about taking a lead in it, and I think we're going to need to continue to look at that. I don't, as futile as it feels right now without money, this is the time to lay the groundwork so we can get some of these facilities up and running. We need to have the plans to step into place to go when the money's available. So I think we still need to prioritize and work with that report and make sure we do those things. I feel strongly about the loss of staff and the loss of hourly staff. We've talked about the permanent positions tonight, but hourlies in this department are really, really important too, and I have great concerns about that. And also the bargaining groups, and if there are, I don't know where that stands at this point, it's all kind of gone quiet for me, but if there are concessions that are made within the bargaining groups, that those stay within the bargaining groups purview, that I understand their general fund savings, but they need to be directed at the areas that the people who have given back so much, to preserve jobs in those areas. It's very important. There's got to be some, for lack of a better word, payback for making the big sacrifice, other than keeping your job, which I understand is important. But, you can't, one group can't have the budget balanced on their back. So those, and I also concur strongly with the Creeks recommendation about beach cleanup. This is just, to me, it's too late in the game. That's a strategy that would have to be looked at well in advance, and I don't believe it's appropriate. I believe it should be paid for by beach users, and beach users pay parking fees, and that's where it should come from. So that's kind of my feeling. Well, I've said everything I want to say. Any other comments? Duraka.
As usual, going after BB, I have to say ditto a lot. I don't have anything. I don't know that any of us are burning with suggestions for changes in the specific changes in the proposed budget. I think that staff has done an amazing job of putting together a proposed budget that mitigates a lot of really painful cuts. And I think that if dirt rolls downhill in budget times, it's the exact opposite, and it rolls uphill. And the big hard choices that have to be made by council, because the big ticket items that they're going to have to balance, they're going to have to make some really big decisions, big political decisions about, how we're going to rob Peter to pay Paul. So, to the extent that we as a commission, or I myself as a commissioner, have their ear at all, I would say that though I don't like, I'm not the hugest fan of enterprise funds as a way of organizing the city, and I'm also not a big fan of really micro targeted revenue streams. I do agree with the Creeks Commission in saying that if you're going to put a tax to the voters to pay for something specifically to achieve a community goal, they have to be very, very careful about changing the game after that revenue stream starts to come in. So I don't have any problem with using Measure B funds, for example, to supplement already existing city expenditure. That's not my problem with the proposal that's been floated. My problem with it is that that money's for clean water and our creeks. And as as Commissioner Chair Longstreet just said very, very well, we need to be making sure that we're not reinforcing inefficiencies in the way that money is managed in the city, such that for political expediency, people who should be paying for a service that they utilize are not paying for it. So all of the suggestions for moving some of these responsibilities or liabilities that our department is picking up, I fully support. I'd also like to express gratitude for what it sounds like the kind of communication and cooperation that we're getting from our friends at the zoo. It's always refreshing to hear somebody willing to step up and play ball, and definitely appreciate that. And I'd like to underline what I said in the work session, and that Chair Longstreet just said, which is that I really think it's really bad that that city employees are putting concessions on the table, and for really no reason that I can get my head around, the city at this point doesn't seem willing to be flexible enough that those concessions do what they're supposed to do, which is preserve jobs and stave off layoffs. That's a problem, and it's something that as a commissioner I have a problem with, because I know what kinds of amazing work our employees in this department do. So we have to rob Peter to pay Paul, but let's not go back on mandates from the voters. I think it's a good budget. I think it's the best that we can do with where we're at. And I'm just very, very grateful to staff for the work and the thinking that they've put into it.
I would like to add to what Bibi and Duraka have said, and I agree with everything that they have both said. One thing that comes to mind for me is the issue of safety, which I brought up before, which is very important. And another issue that I think we need to address is our parks. When I think about, we have a year we can't trim trees, I think, well, is that a safety issue? I'm sure safety will be your number one priority, but I'm thinking about how far we have stretched that budget over the years, and to see this happen again, it makes me feel sad, because our parks are just beautiful gems that we have and we should love and nurture, and it's difficult in these times of budget cuts to do that. And I just want to say how much I appreciate everything staff has done to make all of these things happen and make our city still beautiful, and that's so important. Another thing that's so touching to me is the amount of people that are coming forward with these ideas about how they want to help make this happen. And I agree with Duraka. It's very important that these people are recognized, and that people like Friends of Los Baños that are working to maintain programs for youth. I mean, this is wonderful. Also, I'm very happy about what's happening with the joining of teen programs with community programs. I know each one of the people that are listed on the organizational chart, and I know in all their hearts that each one of those people really cares about youth and the community and the neighborhoods. And I'm just hopeful that their true intention of making this a better community for Santa Barbara on all levels will come through, and they'll be able to make it through this. And I, again, want to thank staff. This is miraculous, putting this together. I've been a commissioner for 14 years, and I was a staff person before that, and I have never seen anything like what we've had to face now. And I just accolades to everyone that has worked so hard. And thank you.
You know, hopefully that my comments will be short, because they always seem to be. I'm not quite sure, being a new commissioner, how we explain to City Council that we are so appreciative of the Friends of Los Banos coming up with a great suggestion, and how we put it into our budget that we want to keep the Sunday swim and, if possible, the Ortega pool. That was just a great suggestion. The one comment is that we might have got a little off track. The beach cleaning, originally we were looking at having the Harbor Commission take it out of their budget, and they threw it back into our budget. So through the creeks, I hope we keep reminding people that we really think that the Harbor Commission ends up with that, because the beach cleaning should be used by the people that use the beach. You know, I'm not here to micromanage. I think I think it's just amazing that with as draconian of a cuts that we've had, that we didn't upset very many people a lot, I think is one way to put it. That the staff did just an amazing job of coming up with something that will work, and with the youth council and the outreach on the neighborhoods, which is a great way to figure out a way to make it work for us in a very limited income stream. So the last thing is something that none of us know, is what's happening at the state budget and how are they going to mess us up. But we'll find that out after the fact, I think. So.
That is just we're going to need to do a motion, but the other thing that I would like to have in our comments to council is that we would like this budget respected as it stands, and not that it works because of all the pieces, and if you start picking pieces out of it, things will not work as well, and it will fall apart. So there are many reasons behind how staff got to certain recommendations, and so I don't believe that it can be reworked from the dais. And I have some really strong feelings about that. When I hear things like the teens told, well, you usually get what you want. It's like, what does that mean? Does that mean that our whole process has to, we have good ideas and we're, every group is giving a bit. So, we sometimes have to trust that we'll come out the other side in good shape. So we need a motion. I think we have the comments worked in. You've all got enough comments there. So we need a motion to accept the 2010 Parks and Recreation operating budget, capital improvement budget, and fees and charges schedule.
So moved.
Second.
And any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay. You have our blessing with comments.
I have another motion.
Okay.
I'd like to move that we revisit the budget item for funding for the Ortega Pool recreational swim program in 3 to 4 months' time, at which time I would like a presentation from staff on how the fundraising efforts of Friends of Los Banos is going towards that end, with a possibility of redirecting funds to help that process along.
And also that, can we add to that we direct staff to work immediately with Friends of Los Banos to, if the money comes forward, to reinstate swim this summer?
I have no objection to that as a...
Okay.
That would be a second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, let's take a short break and then come back, just a 5-minute. I will call the meeting back to order, and we are on item 6, the proposed charter amendment to consolidate the Board of Park Commissioners and Recreation Commission into Parks and Recreation Commission. Ms. Rapp.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, this item is brought back to the Commission resulting from a recommendation from City Council. At your March meeting, you as a Commission had a discussion about proposed recommendations for changes to the City Charter relating to the Commission. You recommended to leave the membership number at 5. And you agreed to changing the name of the commission to, agreed to combining the two commissions into the Park and Recreation Commission. As part of that discussion, there was also a pretty significant discussion about the possibility of formally including a youth voice in the commission as a voting member. And at that time, there were a lot of questions raised as to the legality and the possibility of that. When the City Council discussed the various charter recommendations at their April 28th meeting, they also had a discussion about the possibility of including a youth voice in boards and commissions. And after extensive conversation, where it ended up was, given the Park and Recreation Commission's support and involvement with having a youth intern for, the last 10 years or more, yes, and how successful that experience was, Council would directed staff to work with the city attorney on how that might work legally. And so what you have before you is some language proposed by the city attorney. And then Council asked the Commission if they would like to include the possibility of a youth member as part of the commission, that the Council would like to have a recommendation from the Park and Recreation Commission for that, but relating specifically to the Park and Recreation Commission, not going broader to other city boards and commissions. So I am going to draw on Ms. Sarah Hanna. She did extensive discussions with the city attorney, so as needed we can answer some of your questions. What the city attorney did propose in the language that you have before you is this language is written that the commission would expand to 7 members, but at the commission's discretion, you could leave that size at 5. That's a recommendation that the commission can make as part of their recommendations this evening to City Council. And that the commission, by ordinance, so the charter will allow the city council to indicate that a youth voting member at a minimum age of 16 could be appointed as one of the Park and Recreation Commissioners. And the process for how that youth would be selected and appointed and their term and all of that would be defined through a resolution from the City Council. So we don't need to decide all of that this evening. It's just that the charter language would be changed to allow the possibility of having a youth appointed, and that would be a voting member. The age of 16 was is recommended by staff because that is actually consistent with it's proposed by staff, that's consistent with what we've currently been doing with the youth intern. Current policy for the youth interns says that the youth intern must be at least a junior in high school. So the age can also be a discussion, but that's the thinking behind the recommendation of starting at 16. And other changes other than the possibility of adding a youth member is that you'll see in item A, we have updated the charter to reflect that the Commission acts in an advisory capacity to the City Council in all matters pertaining to parks, recreation, beaches, and you see that we've added creeks, plazas, parkways, and street trees. So those are the primary changes that are proposed to the charter. So I think, and then I just, other than providing any further information to the Commission to help in your discussion, the ballot language will take your recommendation to the City Council. City Council is scheduled to discuss this and make final recommendations or provide direction to staff on the language of the proposed charter changes at their June 16th meeting, and then the proposals would be placed on the November 3rd, 2009 election ballot. So I think with that, Ms. Hannah, was there anything additional? So we're happy to answer any questions that you have. If I can help, both Ms. Hannah and I were present for the council discussion, so if we can help in any way to represent their perspectives, we're happy to do that.
Commissioner Larimore Hall.
Was it discussed, or to your knowledge, is it possible to leave open the number of commissioners? In other words, could the charter read the way that, say, the Constitution does with the Supreme Court, that the commission would be made up to 7 members, say, or between 5 and 7? I think because we didn't have consensus on that issue, and I think that it's a elegant and very appropriate solution to the issue of a youth voting member to leave the option on the table as far as the charter goes. And I'm just wondering if the same is possible in terms of the size of the commission.
Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Larimore Hall, yes, we did actually ask the city attorney whether that was possible, and 2 things. The City Council leaned from their discussion, leaned more towards 7 members if you were going to add a youth member. And I don't really know all the thinking for that, but that was part of the discussion. And the city attorney said that although it could be written that it would be either 5 or 7 members, because you'd have to have the odd number, he recommended against it. It would be very uncommon and wouldn't have the clarity that he feels something in the charter, city charter, should have. And given that charter changes happen very infrequently due to the need to put it on the ballot, he recommended that the commission choose between 5 or 7. But in answer to your question, it could be written the other way. The city attorney just recommended against it.
Just another question. At the last meeting, there was a discussion that to be on the commission, you needed to be an elector, you needed to live in the city and be 18. And what I'm inferring is that may not be true.
Actually, the Chair Longstreet and Commissioner Burns, what the charter allows is for the youth member, and then by resolution, the City Council would adopt criteria and policies. So, I don't know the specific discussion about an elector, but I'm assuming that where that change would take place is in the resolution, which talks about boards, city boards and commissions, and then there would be some exception made for the Park and Recreation Commission youth member. So yes, those are still issues, but they would be addressed in the formation of the resolution where those things would be discussed. Did I correctly convey that?
Chair Longstreet and Commissioners, if the residents of the community vote to approve the charter amendment as it is written and proposed, then a 16-year-old or older could be appointed to the commission. And then at that time, it will go back to the council for resolution and determine, as Ms. Rapp said, the age requirements, the appointment process, and all those types of other things. So as the charter reads, if it is approved, that would make it outside of the need to be an elector.
And we would come back to the commission for your recommendations on, when we get to the resolution stage, we would bring that both to the Youth Council and to the Park and Recreation Commission to make recommendations to City Council on what that should look like.
Well, I think this proves why you have attorneys, because this kind of solves some of the issues that we were grappling with here, and I'm appreciative of that. I think it's general enough to be in the charter, and that, then allows for changes in the future and for future councils to, to make the adjustments needed. I think it might not, the question is still whether you need to be a city resident. Maybe not an elector, obviously, if you're 16, but a city resident. So I don't think that's a bad idea, because, in fact, our charter is truly to serve the residents of Santa Barbara. We do serve the South Coast, but if we're having a youth voice, it would definitely, I think, benefit us to have a youth voice from the city of Santa Barbara. So I don't have any problem with that, any more than all of us sitting here being residents of the city. We are expending the city's money and answer to the residents. So I like the way it cleans up with the creeks and combines our departments. It has been awkward being two separate commissions and things, and this takes care of it. So.
I like it. I think it looks good. I think it does clean it up. And I think that I wouldn't change a thing.
Okay.
Well, there's always got to be a counterpoint. I'm still would be very happy with the way I thought before, with that actually 5 commissioners seem fine. Not discounting the youth vote, because I'm the liaison to the teen council. I don't know if having a youth commissioner and 7 commissioners instead of 5 would really make us a better commission. So I would rather keep it the way we had it, with changing it to 1 commission instead of 2, but keeping it with 5 commissioners.
I really want there to be a voting youth member on this commission, and I'm fearful that if the number stays at 5, that will simply never happen. But I'm not in the abstract for 7. I think 5 is a decent number. I think it's fine to have a youth member and still have it only be 5. I just worry that the political will on future commissions, or even this commission, and the council will be such that it will be, the people will talk themselves out of it because it will seem like too much to have a small commission and one of the members not have hit that magic number of 18. So, which is why I'm not convinced that it is such a, and whatever, I probably could be talked out of this by the city attorney themselves. Well, maybe, but it's why I'm not convinced that building flexibility into the charter wouldn't be good in terms of the number. So I would support, and I'll run it up the flagpole, I would support changing the language in the proposed charter amendments to read either 5 or 7 members. And that way, this commission or future commission, this council or future council can make both of these decisions about including a voting youth member and the size of the commission together in the future.
My problem with it, and this goes to the 10-year history of an intern, is that by nature, they're at a point, the young people we've had for interns are moving on. They're interested kids, they're going somewhere, and it's not likely not to be right here in Santa Barbara. So there's going to be a certain level of turnover. And I think if we were to stay at 5 and have a youth member, that we would be short much of the time. Adult members also take time off, and I think we would see many commission meetings with 3 people at them, and that is not enough people to do the business of the Parks and Recreation Department. So I would just support it as stands, because I think if we want a youth voice, and I also, I've sat on this commission when there have been 7 people, and it might take slightly longer for things to get said, but the other part of it is you get a little more opinion, and that's not a bad thing in my estimation. Right now, we're pretty heavily focused on people in recreation, and we're not so heavily focused, not that it's going to be an arborist or whatever, but we really are lacking certain expertise that we previously at times had. I don't know anything about plants and trees. I mean, I do, but not very much. So anyhow, I would, we don't have representation from the adapted. There's a lot of people we could have embraced onto this commission that 7 people, there would be room for that. And I think it's, I don't think it's bad. I think we are, sometimes we see the turnover and the staggering of commission terms would be a little easier to handle sometimes. And so I supported as it stands. That's my 2 cents. Other 2 cents. Do we need a motion to go forward with this, or okay, wait for action?
Chair Longstreet and Commission, yes, the City Council has asked for your recommendation, and so, and I think that the primary issues are the size and the support for the youth member.
I have a question. Does this mean we won't have interns?
Actually, I was going to make the comment that this actually opens the door. It does mean that the commission could revisit the youth intern, so you could have a youth member appointed to the commission, and you could still have a youth intern. I think that's a discussion that the commission can have.
Because one of the things I really like about the youth intern is there's a mentoring aspect to it that should be built into if we have a youth member. But then on the other hand, if we have a voting member, we don't want to unduly influence them in any way. So that's one of the things I'm kind of struggle with a little bit with this. I really like the intern idea. I really like the fact that we can all mentor that person. So.
Being on the liaison for teen council, I've enjoyed listening to them and have given advice that sometimes they take. And so I agree the mentoring is very good. But as I'm going back to this, I voted to change the two commissions to one commission. And we've kind of gone beyond that to now we've done that, and now let's make it from 5 to 7. And we're going to end up with a vote of the people. And realistically, from my perspective, nothing in our organization is really broken. I don't know if we need to go to do. We're heading off on a tangent I didn't think we were going to get to. So I'm, and however this vote goes, I hope that it be mentioned that at City Council, not everyone was in favor of going forward with this. Because I think we're heading off onto a tangent that I don't know we really need to go to.
When you say that, the tangent in the youth vote or the tangent in the 5 to 7 or both?
Actually, both.
Okay.
I was thinking we were just going to change the name of change it to one commission instead of two. And I was happy with that, but I didn't think we were going to go to the 7, and at the same time I didn't think we were going to the youth vote, and now those both tangents were more than I was expecting.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Just for the record, when I was chair, I was the one that brought forward the changing of 5 to 7, and that's how this originally started. The Parks and Rec Commission, as far as joining the two, that has been something that's been looming out there for many, many years. So if that makes sense, 5 to 7 was really the thing that moved it forward, I think.
And we didn't go down to 5 until about 6 years ago.
That's about right.
This institutional memory.
It's a good thing.
Commissioner Larimore Hall.
Yeah, I don't think that we're off on a tangent. I mean, this is a proposal from council that they want our input on, because it's not just members of this body that are interested in entertaining the notion of having a youth voting member. I think that I think the sky's the limit, and we can have a really exciting conversation about our youth internship program and what it would mean if there's also a voting youth member on the commission. Maybe the role of a youth intern isn't so much to be sitting up here for meetings, but is all the other stuff and being mentored and learning about all of the rest of Parks and Recreation or the city and how the city works, et cetera. And I just think we can do a lot. I was 16 and younger in this community. I did not think then, and I don't think now, that there is nearly enough real, serious voice and power for young people in this community and the decisions that it makes. I'm for a charter amendment that allows making some small headway in dealing with that issue for the city of Santa Barbara on this commission. With that in mind, it doesn't seem like the flexible 5 or 7 is very popular, besides in my own head. So I would support the language as is, because I think that the worst thing to do would be to go down to 5. Because like I said, the cynic in me says they'll never be a youth member.
Okay. Was that a motion?
I thought you moved, so whatever. It's either a motion or a second.
Okay, well then I'll move and you second, and
Sounds good.
Discussion now. Any more discussion?
I see where I see the potential. I see that it has that there's some good things that may come of it. I'm just my feeling is I'm not going to be in favor of it. I just don't want it to be a surprise. If it works, I'm very happy, and I hope it will if it does come together.
Okay. No surprises. Any other comments? Then I will call for the vote. All those in favor of the motion to support the charter language ahead in front of us, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Scott, aye. Nay.
I think it's always good when we can have disagreement and we show we're not just blindly walking down the road. So thank you very much.
I'll see you outside later.
No, thank you very much. And, I think we can all talk to council about what our concerns are. And that brings us, I believe, to the end of our agenda.
Move to adjourn.
Second on that? Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously, and thank you.